evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Sunday, Yom Rishon. Let's light up the darkness. Anybody who happens to be up tonight, I'm scheduled to appear on WABC Talk Radio, New York City area, 1:30 a.m. Eastern Time. 10:30 for me, not so bad. But I'll be a guest on Frank Moreno's show to discuss my book, Let My People Laugh, Greatest Jewish Jokes of All Time. And I think that's going to be available afterward. They put it on Spotify as a podcast. Okay, who else is around? Who's in the house? Melissa in Great Neck, Guy in Ohio, Bill in Mid-Missouri, Shandora in the Bronx, Sharon in New Jersey, Joe in the Inland Empire, Belle in rainy Texas, Nancy in North Carolina, Lorraine in Texas, Karen in Northern California, Belle in Florida, Augusto saying shalom, Spencer in Connecticut, Chaim in Florida, Ella in Southern California, Alan in New York City, Aoife in Florida. Welcome, everybody. Our daf is page 53 here in Tractate Sanhedrin, the 24th volume of the Talmud, continuing our discussion of Mishnah number 4 here in chapter 7, generally talking about the 4 types of death penalty, which are assigned to various death penalty offenses, which can be tried in a rabbinic court, and if the defendant is convicted, they're going to assign one of these types of death penalty. If it's explicitly written in the Torah, which kind of death penalty, obviously that's the one they do. And we spent a lot of time deriving what type of death penalty would apply in cases where it's not spelled out. The 4 types being stoning, where the person is thrown off a platform, burning, where molten lead goes down the throat, decapitation with a sword, and strangulation, where a scarf is wrapped around the neck and pulled in 2 directions until the person suffocates, which we were talking about yesterday at the close of class. And interesting, the question that was asked at the end of class is from where is it derived that there is a punishment of execution by strangulation at all? Since this type of capital punishment is not mentioned in the Torah explicitly. So we should say that decapitation by the sword is the least severe type, as it is mentioned in the Torah, right? They've already said that in terms of severity, strangulation is the least severe because it's the least damaging to the corpse that's going to be buried afterward. So that was the cliffhanger yesterday. From where is it derived that strangulation exists? Sadly, the question is not going to be answered. Rava said the 4 types of death penalty are learned as a tradition. That is the answer. There is no question as to the types of capital punishment that exist in halacha. Rather, the question is, which type of execution is meted out as punishment for which sins? In other words, no, the Torah doesn't spell out strangulation as one of the 4 types. How do we know that when we need the least severe type of execution that we go to strangulation? That's a matter learned as a tradition, presumably going back perhaps as far as Moses at Sinai, or at least to much earlier sages, probably at the level of the prophets. Okay. The Gemara then asks, what is meant by Rabbi Yonason's statement? It is not because strangulation is the most lenient type of capital punishment. The Gemara answers, at the root of the matter, Rabbi Yonason and Rabbi Yoshia disagree with regard to the issue that is the subject of the dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the majority and the rabbis, i.e., whether strangulation or decapitation by the sword is the least severe type of execution. It's an interesting question. Right? If you had to die by one of these types of death, decapitation sounds like it would be the least painful, right? Over just like that. but not so nice for your family that are going to have to bury a headless body. I mean, the body and the head will go together, but quite an impact on the body, so to speak. So what's better, the no pain but a degraded corpse, or strangulation, which it'll entail some suffering for a short amount of time, but the most intact type of corpse. So the Gemara answers, at the root of the matter, Rabbi Yonas and Rabbi Yoshia disagree with regard to the issues that is the subject of the dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis, whether strangulation or decapitation is the least severe type of execution. So consequently, Rabbi Yonason does not employ the reasoning that strangulation is the least severe. Because which we can surmise from the question that he asked at the end of yesterday's class. Now, Rabbi Zera said to Abaye, with regard to the rest of those transgressors, other than necromancers and sorcerers, who are stoned to death, because the Torah says so, with regard to whom stoning is, these others with regard to whom stoning is not explicitly written in the Torah, because their punishment is derived via a verbal analogy from that of a necromancer and a sorcerer, about which the verse does state explicitly, they shall be put to death, they shall stone them with stones, their blood shall be upon them. Leviticus 20:27. Now, through what verbal analogy is their punishment derived? How do we know that these other ones who are somehow derived from the sorcerers and necromancers' punishment, what is the basis of this verbal analogy? Well, is it derived from the phrase, they shall be put to death? Or is it derived from the phrase, their blood shall be upon them? So Abaye said to him, it is derived from a verbal analogy based on the phrase, their blood, and their blood shall be upon them. As if it is derived from the phrase, they shall be put to death, why do I need the verbal analogy between their blood and their blood? Why does this term need to be written with regard to the various laws? And the Gemara asks, rather, what is more reasonable? If it is derived from the verbal analogy between their blood and their blood, we have the same problem. Why is the phrase, they shall be put to death? We've already said that they shall be stoned. Why is the Torah adding this seemingly superfluous phrase? And the Gemara answers, this expression is necessary as another law is derived from it. As it is taught in a Baraisa, the verse with regard to a murderer states, he that smote him shall be put to death, for he is a murderer. Numbers 35:21. Now, I have derived only that the murderer is put to death with the mode of execution written concerning him, which is decapitation by the sword. From where do I derive that if you cannot put him to death with the mode of execution written concerning him, for example, if the condemned man will escape if one does not kill him, then it is permitted and in fact obligated to put him to death with any mode of execution with which you can put him to death, right? You might have thought that since the Torah says explicitly that the murderer has to be decapitated by the sword, so then if he's escaping, and the only way to stop him from escaping, for example, is to, throw a rock, off a cliff that's going to fall through his rowboat, and then the boat's going to go down and he's going to drown. Right? So you will kill the escaping convicted murderer, but not by decapitation by the sword. He's going to end up drowning. So you might have thought that, then we're not permitted to do that. We have to somehow capture him so that we can decapitate him by the sword, even though this risks very strongly that he'll get away. So you might have thought that, but here we're learning that a convicted murderer, ideally you decapitate him with the sword, but if the only way to prevent him from escaping is to kill him some other way, you kill him some other way, so that the death sentence is carried out, even if it is not by the means explicitly stated in the Torah. And how do we know that that is the case? How do we know this? Because the verse states about the murderer, he that smote him shall be put to death, where it's one of those cases of the doubled verb, which we don't have this kind of thing in English, but in Hebrew, when we double a verb for emphasis, in this case, mot yumat, shall be put to death, or indeed he shall be put to death. He shall surely be put to death. Well, the doubled verb teaches us that he is put to death in any case, by any mode of execution. So this exchange between Rabbi Zera and Abaye was subsequently discussed by later sages, the Amoraim. Rav Acha of Difti said to Ravina, and if the law that there are transgressors other than necromancers and sorcerers who are punished by stoning is derived from they shall be put to death, what is difficult according to Rabbi Zera? It appears from Rabbi Zera's question that he was troubled by the possibility that this law is derived from the phrase, they shall be put to death. If we say that the case of adultery of a married woman would pose a difficulty according to Rabbi Zera, as it is stated, the adulterer and the adulteress shall be put to death, Leviticus 20:10. And therefore, perhaps we should derive and learn from the phrase, they shall be put to death, stated with regard to a necromancer and a sorcerer, that just as there, with regard to the necromancer and the sorcerer, they are executed by stoning, so too here, with regard to the adulterer and the adulteress, they should be executed by stoning. This does not pose a difficulty. Wait a minute. So Rav Acha of Difti explains why it does not pose a difficulty. From the fact that the Merciful One states that a betrothed woman who committed adultery is executed by stoning, by inference we learn that a married woman, right, betrothed requires a bill of divorce, but they haven't become fully married yet. She's probably still living in her father's house and hasn't, completed the marriage and moved in with her husband. So either way, if she has, if she intentionally has sexual relations with another man, that's not her betrothed. This is adultery, but it's a different death penalty than if she is married, right? So the Merciful One states that a betrothed woman who committed adultery is executed by stoning. And by inference, we learn that a married woman who committed adultery is not executed by stoning, but rather she is executed by a less severe type of execution. Therefore, it could not have been derived from the case of a necromancer and a sorcerer that the punishment for the adultery of a married woman is execution by stoning, since it has to be different than the method of execution for a betrothed woman who commits adultery. And if it is rather the case of one who wounds his father or his mother, which is also a death penalty offense, because it violates the fifth commandment, that also poses a difficulty according to Rabbi Zera. As it is stated, quote, and he who smites his father or his mother shall be put to death, Exodus 21:15. And therefore, perhaps we should derive and learn from the punishment of the necromancer and the sorcerer, where it also says they shall be put to death, that one who wounds his father or his mother should be executed by stoning. Then this too does not pose a difficulty. Rav Acha of Difti explains why it does not pose a difficulty. Rather than deriving the punishment of one who wounds his father or his mother from a necromancer and a sorcerer, let us rather derive it from adultery with a married woman. As everywhere that the death penalty is stated in the Torah without specification, you may not take it to be more stringent with regard to it, i.e. to mean that the sinner should be sentenced to a severe type of execution. Rather, when the Torah says that something is a death penalty offense but does not specify which death penalty it is, you should assume, the ruling is that you're going to choose the most lenient form that is available. A more lenient that type of execution should be applied, since in both the case of adultery and the case of one who wounds his parent, the type of execution is evidently not stoning. Why was Rabbi Zera troubled by the possibility that the source for execution by stoning in cases other than a necromancer and a sorcerer is derived from the phrase, they shall be put to death? And Ravina said to Rav Acha of Difti, it is the law concerning the rest of those who are stoned themselves, which poses a difficulty according to Rabbi Zera. And this is because if their punishment is derived from the phrase, they shall be put to death, then rather than deriving from the case of a necromancer and a sorcerer that these transgressors are executed by the severe method of stoning, let us rather derive from the case of one who commits adultery with a married woman, with regard to whom it is stated they shall be put to death. That they should be executed by strangulation, the less severe method. And he therefore verified that it is derived from the phrase, their blood shall be upon them, that they are executed by stoning when that form of execution applies. That was complicated. Might become a little clearer now because we just concluded the discussion of Mishnah number 4. Here comes Mishnah number 5, which is about the death penalty of stoning. Now, these transgressors are the ones who are stoned to death. One who engages in intercourse with his mother, right? So one who commits incest with his mother, the death penalty is stoning. Or with his father's wife, even if she is not his mother, right? So if stoning, if he sleeps with his mother or his stepmother. Or with his daughter-in-law, right? The wife of his son. Or with a male, or with an animal, and a woman who engages in intercourse with an animal, and one who blasphemes, and one who engages in idol worship, and one who gives off his offspring to Moloch, and a necromancer, and a sorcerer, and one who desecrates Shabbos, and one who curses his father or his mother, and one who engages in intercourse with a betrothed young woman, and an inciter who incites individuals to idol worship, and a subverter who incites an entire city to idol worship, and the warlock, and a stubborn and rebellious son. These are all sins that are spelled out in the Torah, and the punishment for each of them, for one who is convicted of that, is stoning, death by stoning. Now the Mishnah elaborates, one who unwittingly engages in intercourse with his mother, who is also his father's wife, is liable to bring 2 sin offerings for his intercourse with her. Now, this is unwittingly, right? That's why we're talking about a sin offering. One who intentionally, knowingly commits incest, let's say, God forbid, sleeping with his mother, that's a death penalty offense. Unwittingly, maybe this kid was adopted. Maybe he was, in a war. He was captured and taken as a slave by the enemy. And many years later, he ends up meeting this older woman and has a relationship with her, and they sleep together. And only later he finds out that she's his mom, right? So he didn't do that on purpose. She didn't do that on purpose. That was an unwitting act of incest. So for that, they are liable to bring a sin offering. Here, what we're learning is there are 2 sin offerings that he becomes liable to bring. One, because he committed incest with this woman who is his mother. And if she's married at the time that he does that, then another one for adultery. So this would be unwitting on his behalf, on his side. She should know if she's married or not. Right? One who unwittingly engages in intercourse with his mother, who is also his father's wife, is liable to bring 2 sin offerings for his intercourse with her. One due to the prohibition against engaging in intercourse with one's mother, and the other sin offering due to the prohibition against engaging in intercourse with one's father's wife. Now this would apply even if the father has died. Rabbi Yehuda says he is liable to bring only 1 sin offering due to the prohibition against engaging in intercourse with his mother. So one who unwittingly engages in intercourse with his father's wife while his father is married to her is liable to bring 2 sin offerings, one due to the prohibition against engaging in intercourse with his father's wife, and one due to the prohibition against engaging in intercourse with a married woman. He is liable due to the former prohibition, both during his father's lifetime and after his father's death. Right? You can't sleep with your stepmother, whether your father's alive or not. And whether the relationship between the woman and his father is one of betrothal or one of marriage, the prohibition against adultery would apply. I mean, sleeping with a married woman and also sleeping with his father's wife. Likewise, one who unwittingly engages in intercourse with his daughter-in-law during his son's lifetime is liable to bring 2 sin offerings for his intercourse with her, one due to the prohibition against engaging in intercourse with a daughter-in-law, and the other sin offering due to the prohibition against engaging in intercourse with a married woman. and the former liability applies both during his son's lifetime and after his son's death, and whether the relationship between the woman and his son is one of betrothal or one of marriage. That's always, this is really uncomfortable material, but the sages are going to speak about it quite dispassionately, and just, again, as a matter of logic and understanding the law, figuring out which penalty applies and why, and not get into the drama of how such a thing could come to be. Now, the Gemara. With regard to one who engages in intercourse with his mother, it is taught in a Baraisa that Rabbi Yehuda says, if his mother was not suitable for his father, as their marriage was forbidden, then he would be liable only due to the prohibition against engaging in intercourse with one's mother, but not due to the prohibition against engaging in intercourse with one's father's wife. In other words, if his mother married his father in a marriage that never could have taken root, like, God forbid, a brother and a sister married, right? And then they had a child. Okay, so the brother and sister cannot marry each other. Maybe they committed incest and a child was born of that, which would be a mamzer. So that's awful enough. But because they were never married, so if this mamzer then slept with his mother, nice family, so he would be liable for incest with his mother, but not for sleeping with his father's wife, because she never became his father's wife, because a brother and sister cannot get married. Now this is clarified. What does it mean that she is not suitable for him? If we say that the mother and father were liable to receive the punishment of kares, or liable to receive a court-imposed death penalty, right? Kares is death at the hands of the heavenly court, or a court-imposed death penalty, meaning a death penalty imposed at the hands of an earthly court. So if the marriage was one that the punishment for it would either be kares or execution, so then it's not a marriage, right? In which their marriage did not take effect. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda holds that in this case, there is no prohibition against engaging in intercourse with one's father's wife. Well, this poses a difficulty, as accordingly, by inference, it may be understood that the rabbis hold that there is such a prohibition, even if she is not suitable for him. But doesn't everyone agree that in such a case, the father has no capability of betrothal with regard to her, even if they cohabit? She is not considered his wife, so why are we saying that Rabbi Yehuda says this? It must be that all the sages agree that if a brother and sister cohabit, and pretend to get married, go through the motions of getting married, it doesn't matter. They're not married because no marriage can take hold between a brother and sister. So then if the offspring of that union slept with his mother, he'd be liable for incest. But who would say that he's also liable for sleeping with his father's wife? She's not his wife. Why do we say Rabbi Yehuda says that? Everybody must agree with it. So rather, it is clear that Rabbi Yehuda is referring to something else. He's referring to a case where the father and mother are liable for violating a prohibition for their intercourse, but they are not liable to receive kares or capital punishment. So this would be, for example, if a priest marries a divorced woman. She's prohibited to him. That marriage shouldn't have happened, and he becomes disqualified from serving as a priest if he marries a divorced woman. But the marriage is still a marriage, right? We might force them to divorce, in which case he could then start serving again in the temple, in the Holy Temple when the temple is standing. But we don't just separate them and he can go back without a get. He's going to have to give her a bill of divorce, a get. So that would be a marriage that violates a prohibition. Here it would seem that Rabbi Yehuda says a marriage that violates a prohibition is not a marriage at all, but the majority say, no, a marriage that violates a prohibition shouldn't have happened, but once it did happen, it is a marriage, and to break it off would require a get. So let's keep reading. And Rabbi Yehuda, in this matter, holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who says that betrothal does not take effect with those women with regard to whom one is liable for violating a prohibition if one engages in intercourse with them. But the rabbis disagree with this. In their opinion, betrothal does take effect in such cases, although a prohibition is involved. Therefore, the mother is considered the father's wife, and if her son sleeps with her, he would be liable, if he sleeps with her unwittingly, not knowing it's his mother, he would be liable to bring 2 sin offerings, one for committing incest with his mother and one for sleeping with his father's wife. Rav Oshaya raises an objection to this explanation, as it is stated in a Mishna in Tractate Yevamos on page 20a. If a Yevama, right, so a man dies childless and he leaves a widow and a brother. Now the Yevama and the Yavam, right, the widow and the surviving brother have an obligation to marry, and their first child is going to be the heir of the man who died without children. Or if they choose not to marry each other, they have to perform chalitza, the chalitza ritual, which frees her to go marry whoever she wants to marry. So either yibum, they marry each other, or they perform the chalitza ritual and then they go their separate ways. Okay, why are we talking about this? If a yavama is forbidden to her yavam by a prohibition resulting from a mitzvah. So if, for example, there were 2 brothers who are paternal brothers, right? They have the same father and different mothers. And then one of the brothers marries a woman that is permitted to him, but through the mother's side is actually related to that man's half-brother. And then the husband dies, and so he leaves a Yavama and a Yavam who are prohibited to each other because they're actually related to each other. She wasn't prohibited to her husband, but she is prohibited to her brother-in-law because her husband and her brother-in-law were half-brothers, and she's related to the brother-in-law through the mother's side. So what this means is they have to perform chalitza. They cannot perform yibum because she's prohibited to her brother-in-law for this reason. If a yavam is forbidden to her yavam by a prohibition resulting from a mitzvah or by a prohibition stemming from sanctity, then, since in these cases the yibum is not, the levirate bond, right, the obligation to perform yibum or chalitza is not fundamentally nullified, she performs chalitza in order to become free of the levirate bond, and due to the prohibition, she does not enter into yibum, into levirate marriage. Now on page 53b. Now the Mishnah explains, a prohibition resulting from mitzvah. Like these would be the ways that the Yavama would be prohibited to the Yavam, right? They're going to look at 2 different ways that she could be prohibited. One is called a prohibition resulting from a mitzvah, and the other is called a prohibition resulting from sanctity. So a prohibition resulting from a mitzvah, this is referring to a secondary forbidden relative. For example, the daughter-in-law of your son, right? This would be like your grandson's wife. This is not prohibited by Torah law, but is prohibited by rabbinic law, right? The Torah lists which relatives are prohibited to marry each other, like a brother and sister. That's explicitly stated in the Torah. They cannot marry each other. Likewise, you can't marry your daughter-in-law. But could you marry your grandson's widow, after your grandson dies? By Torah law, yes, that's not explicitly prohibited, but the rabbis expanded the number of relationships that are prohibited from marriage to make a fence around the Torah and distance people from even coming close to committing incest. So that's called prohibited by rabbinic law. So the sages instituted this prohibition in order to distance people from incest. So the Gemara explains, and why did the sages call it a prohibition resulting from a mitzvah? Because it is a mitzvah to listen to the words of the sages, right? A rabbinic prohibition, right? One that the rabbis instituted to protect us from coming to violate prohibitions that are explicitly written in the Torah, are just as strong, in terms of that it is a law that binds us as laws that are written in the Torah, right? We have to follow the rabbinic ordinances and decrees and prohibitions, just like we have to follow the Torah laws and ordinances and prohibitions. And why? Because it is a commandment, written in the Torah, that we will listen to our elders in every generation. And that's what we mean when we say, the rabbinic ordinances that have been passed down to us. Now, the Mishnah continues. A prohibition stemming from sanctity, this is referring to the marriage of a widow to a high priest, or the marriage of a divorcee, or of a woman who has performed chalitza to an ordinary priest. Right? As I mentioned before, a priest cannot marry a divorced woman. And if he does, right, he's disqualified from serving in the priesthood. So this is a prohibition deriving from sanctity. So this could come up again in the case of a yavama and a yavam, where I suppose I guess what it would be is that the brother who died, he had to be a priest too, right? If his brother's a priest, he's a priest. So let's say that he married a woman that he shouldn't have married, a divorcee, and then he dies childless. So now, does his brother have to marry her? No. The first one shouldn't have married her, and the second one shouldn't have married her either. I mean, the second one cannot marry her if we're going to follow the law. But does he have to perform chalitza? Sounds like, yeah, but let's keep reading. A prohibition stemming from sanctity is referring to the marriage of a widow to a high priest, or of a divorcee or a woman who has performed chalitza in the past to an ordinary priest. So the Gemara explains, and why do the sages call it a prohibition stemming from sanctity? As it is written, with regard to the priests, they shall be sanctified to their God. When they violate the laws of the priesthood, they are, what's the word I'm looking for? Desecrating their priesthood. And it is taught in a Baraisa with regard to this Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda switches the terms. He refers to the marriage of a divorcee or of a chalutza to a priest as a prohibition resulting from a mitzvah, and to the marriage of secondary relatives as a prohibition stemming from sanctity. The labels are different for Rabbi Yehuda, but the same laws apply. Now, the Gemara infers he switches the terms but does not dispute the law. But even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that if a priest marries a chalutza and then dies, a chalutza is a woman who has performed chalitza in the past, if a priest marries a chalutza and then he dies, she requires chalitza if he left her and a brother. And if it enters your mind that Rabbi Yehuda holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, this poses a difficulty. After all, those liable for violating prohibitions, according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, are considered like those liable to receive kares. And those liable to receive kares are not capable of performing chalitza and yibum, as the mitzvah of yibum does not apply to such relationships. Right? When the original marriage was prohibited by kares, like let's say brother and sister, so then yibum just doesn't even apply because the original marriage was not a marriage. Rabbi Akiva holds that a marriage that violates a prohibition produces a similar result. Rabbi Yehuda seemed to be agreeing with Rabbi Akiva earlier, that now seems to not be agreeing with Rabbi Akiva. So what's happening? And the Gemara resolves the difficulty. Rabbi Yehuda does hold in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And as for his comment with regard to the definitions of a prohibition resulting from a mitzvah and a prohibition stemming from sanctity, he merely stated his opinion in accordance with the statement of the first Tana, but he himself does not hold accordingly. When Rav Yitzchak came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, right, from the land of Israel to the Jewish community in Babylonia, he taught a Baraisa, as we learned in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda says, one who engages in intercourse with his mother, who is also his father's wife, is liable to bring only one sin offering due to the fact that she is his mother, whether or not her marriage to his father was legitimate. Only one sin offering. Why are we talking about sin offerings? Because it wasn't done intentionally. This was an unwitting. He didn't know it was his mother when he slept with her. The Gemara asks, and what is the reason for this? Abaye says, it is because the verse states, the nakedness of your father and the nakedness of your mother you shall not uncover. She is your mother, and you shall not uncover her nakedness. Leviticus 18:7. Sounds like there were some superfluous phrases in that prohibition, right? Don't we know already from the nakedness of your father and the nakedness of your mother, you shall not uncover. Okay, you can't have sex with either one of your parents. But then the Torah adds, she is your mother. You shall not uncover her nakedness. It's repetitious. So Rabbi Yehuda derives from this verse that you shall render him liable due to the fact that she is his mother, but you shall not render him liable to bring a second sin offering due to the fact that she is his father's wife. And the Gemara asks, well, if that is so, it should be derived from the verse, the nakedness of your father's wife you shall not uncover. It is your father's nakedness in Leviticus 18:8, that you shall render him liable due to the fact that she is his father's wife, but you shall not render him liable due to the fact that she is his mother. Right? If Rabbi Yehuda is saying that these extra words mean that he only has to bring one sin offering, but then you can apply the same logic to the other prohibition, which also has excess phrases and the same, in almost exactly the same exact excess phrases. So why not derive it that way? So the Gemara answers, but if so, with regard to one's mother, who is his father's wife, it is found that the verse stands, i.e., it is written here with regard to intercourse with one's mother, and excludes liability due to the fact that she is his father's wife, and it stands there with regard to intercourse with one's father's wife and excludes liability due to the fact that she is his mother. If you say it both ways, well, the result now is that for his mother, who is not his father's wife, he would be liable. And for his father's wife, who is not his mother, if he slept with her, he would be liable. But if he slept with his mother, who is also his father's wife, then he would not be liable at all. Right? If you follow this logic to its conclusion. That's obviously absurd. So we must have made a mistake in the logic. So now they're going to go back. And furthermore, according to the rabbis also, who disagree with Rabbi Yehuda, and hold that one who engages in intercourse with his mother, and if she is also married to his father, then he is liable to, and he did this unwittingly, so he would be liable to bring 2 sin offerings. So even according to the rabbis, isn't the verse, she is your mother, written? So i.e., how do they explain this verse? So rather, that phrase is coming to teach something else. And what is that? It is necessary for the law derived by Rav Shesha, the son of Rav Idi, as the Gemara will soon explain on page 54a. Therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda as well, that phrase is necessary for the law derived by Rav Shesha, the son of Rav Idi, and Rav Yehuda's opinion in the Mishnah cannot be derived from it. So what are we doing? So rather, Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika, says that there is a different source for Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. The verse states, you shall not uncover her nakedness, ervata, in the singular form, from which it is derived that you shall render him liable for one forbidden sexual relationship, erva, but you shall not render him liable for 2 types of forbidden sexual relationships by one deed that he committed, having sex with his mother. Now the Gemara asks, if that is so, then from the verse, you shall not uncover the nakedness of your daughter-in-law, she is your son's wife, you shall not uncover her nakedness, at Leviticus 18:15, should it also be derived that you shall render him liable for one forbidden sexual relationship, but you shall not render him liable for 2 types of forbidden sexual relationships? But didn't we learn in the Mishnah, one who engages in intercourse with his daughter-in-law is liable, unwittingly, right, is liable to bring 2 sin offerings for his intercourse with her. One, due to the prohibition against engaging in intercourse with his daughter-in-law, and the other sin offering due to the prohibition against engaging in intercourse with a married woman. The former liability applies both during his son's lifetime and after his son's death, and Rabbi Yehuda does not dispute this law. So rather, it must be explained that since the daughter-in-law has one body, although engaging in intercourse with her involves 2 prohibitions, the term her nakedness, ervata, in the singular is written. Here too, with regard to one's father's wife, since she has one body, although there are 2 prohibitions, the term her nakedness, ervata, is written. So that must be why Rabbi Yehuda says only 1 sin offering. Rather, Rava says that there's a different source for Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda holds that concerning the meaning of the phrase, the nakedness of your father, this is referring to your father's wife. And he derives this interpretation by means of a verbal analogy from the verse, and the man who lies with his father's wife, he has uncovered his father's nakedness, Leviticus 20, verse 11. And the Torah indicates that it is forbidden, whether she is his father's wife who is his mother, or whether she is his father's wife who is not his mother. Right? Whether she's his mother or stepmother, it's still forbidden. From where is it derived that one who engages in intercourse with his mother who is not his father's wife is liable? The verse states subsequently, the nakedness of your mother you shall not uncover. And from the ensuing phrase, she is your mother, it is derived that in a case where his mother is also his father's wife, you shall render him liable due to the fact that she is his mother, but you shall not render him liable due to the fact that she is his father's wife, is what Rabbi Yehuda would say as a reason for only one sin offering. But again, that's the minority opinion. If somebody sleeps with his mother, who is also his father's wife, he brings 2 sin offerings. If he did that unwittingly. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. It is taught in a baraisa in accordance with the opinion of Rava. With regard to the verse, and the man who lies with his father's wife, it is taught in a baraisa in accordance with the opinion of Rava. With regard to the verse, and the man who lies with his father's wife, he has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them. Leviticus 20, verse 11. So the term, the man, excludes a minor. In the verse, who lies with his father's wife, this indicates that he is liable to receive capital punishment, whether she is his father's wife, who is his mother, or whether she is his father's wife, who is not his mother. And from where is it derived that he is liable in a case where she is his mother, who is not his father's wife? The verse states he has uncovered his father's nakedness. Although this phrase does not relate directly to the case of one's mother who is not his father's wife, the law in this case is derived from this phrase, as it is free, right? It's free for interpretation, i.e. the phrase is superfluous in this context, and it is evidently included in the Torah in this verse in order to compare between the 2 cases and learn a verbal analogy from it, as the Brisa will elaborate below. And from the phrase, both of them shall be put to death, it is derived that they are executed by stoning. And the Brisa asks, do you say that they are executed by stoning? Or is it rather by one of all the other types of death penalty that are stated in the Torah? And the Brisa answers, it is stated here, their blood shall be upon them. And it is stated with regard to a necromancer and a sorcerer, their blood shall be upon them. And just as there, the verse states that a necromancer and a sorcerer are executed by stoning, so too, here, with regard to one who engages in intercourse with his father's wife, the transgressors are executed by stoning, which proves what we learned in the Mishna, that these are among the categories where the transgressors who are convicted are executed by stoning. That's where we'll pick it up tomorrow, Monday, at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Take a few questions. Yosef, if burning is a death penalty, how does this not contradict the prohibition on cremation or any destruction of a body? Well, remember that burning is not burning with wood, not burning at the stake. You don't burn the body. That's the whole point that we learned yesterday, that burning means they pour molten lead down your throat so that they won't burn the body, which directly answers your question. No, cremation is prohibited. Even for a transgressor who is guilty of an offense that results in the death penalty of burning, his body is not burned. And we learn that out from the deaths of Nadav and Avihu when they brought strange fire on the altar in the wilderness, and a fire from the Lord came and consumed them, but it consumed their souls, not their bodies. Their bodies were intact. And likewise, the death of Korach and his assembly, their souls were taken in some kind of heavenly fire, but not their bodies. Shandora. So Oedipus would have to bring 2 sin offerings. So I know that Oedipus, the Oedipus complex, is because he slept with his mother. And if she was still married to his father when he did it, then exactly right. He would have to bring 2 sin offerings. And why is he not subject to a death penalty? Because he did it unwittingly, right? He didn't know that he was sleeping with his mother. So it's exactly right. Bill, I'm wondering what the distinction here is between a warlock and a sorcerer. In modern English, those 2 are largely synonymous, but in older forms of English, they were subtly distinct, with the word warlock implying specifically the breach of oaths, as well as the use of black magic more generally. It seems unlikely that's precisely what the Daf means by listing the 2 separately, but I take for granted the 2 are separate since they're each listed. Correct. Necromancers definitely refers to people who can converse with the dead. And I believe that sorcerers are also somehow getting communication from the dead or predicting the future in a way that they're sort of acting like a false prophet. Often talking with the dead is for the purpose of getting information that will help you in this world. And that's why necromancers and sorcerers seem to be grouped together. It's definitely linked to some kind of prohibited communication with souls in the world of souls. And there are two views among the sages of why, and the later commentators, of why this is prohibited. One view is it's possible to communicate with the dead, but one should not do it. It's prohibited. And the other view is it's not possible to communicate with the dead, and therefore these people are charlatans who are committing a form of avodah zarah and believing that they're speaking with the dead. Rambam, Maimonides, doesn't believe that one can communicate with the dead. And so these people are charlatans, but there are plenty of other views that it is possible and is simply prohibited. I'll just mention in passing that I know a rabbi, is a great rabbi, amazing rabbi, whose work I respect very much. And he told me that his wife, was not religious when she was young and became religious later. And that she, actually had this gift of being able to work as a medium. And I mean, he knows her, it was not fake. It was real. Somehow she was able to have communication with the dead. And then when, she became religious, she stopped and never did it again. But there are people, according to him, and I respect his word very much, that there are people who have this ability. We don't understand how, but it is prohibited according to Torah law. Now, an interesting thing there is I'm not sure if that violates the Noahide commandments. So perhaps it is prohibited by Torah law for a Jew to engage in communing with the dead. I don't know. I just don't know if it's prohibited for non-Jews, according to Torah law, to commune with the dead. I don't know. And finally, Ilanit, shalom from windy Silver Spring, that just rudely blew down the large steel and fabric sukkah and left it in a twisted pile of rubble. End of an era. Years of service to multiple families. Oh, I'm so sorry. Wow, that is a shame. End of an era. So with God's help, there'll be a new sukkah. And may that sukkah serve multiple families with great joy for many years. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Monday at the regular Monday time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night.